Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Welcome.
everybody.
Welcome to Tech Tip Talk. I'm Sarah Walworth.
I'm Christina McGrath, and we are Knitting Tech Editors.
So, here on Tech Tip Talk, we answer your questions about tech editing, knitting design, and knitting pattern writing. We invite you now, put any questions you have for us into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them during this broadcast.
This month, we're welcoming Lesley Ann Robinson of Knit Graffiti. She's the author of Brioche Knitting for Beginners and Beyond. Lesley also teaches a whole series of courses titled Mastering Brioche and designs incredible pieces for knitters. We're psyched to have her on and talk about writing in and working with this technique and, everything else that comes up that we want to talk about. So let's go, Sarah.
All right, let's bring her up and put her in the, whoops, nope, wrong one.
Hi, Lesley. Thank you so
Hi.
much for joining us today. We're so psyched to have you.
Yes, me too. Thank you so much, Christina and Sarah. I'm so excited to be here.
And looks like we've got people from all over the world here. Thank you for coming and joining us live. We're excited to have you. Hi, Jen. Hi, Pat. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Sarah's my patron.
Oh, that's
Hi.
awesome.
Yeah.
We like to start right at the beginning. So tell us, how did you get started working in the knitting industry?
Well, I actually started knitting in college. I actually have a minor in fiber arts. So I actually originally was an interior designer, and then I learned how to knit. Well, then I got married and got pregnant. And so then we moved away from New York where I was working. And my husband was working as I was like a stay-at-home mom. And I was just knitting for fun and for family and gifts and that kind of thing. And I actually was in a knitting group, and several of the people in my knitting group started publishing patterns on Ravelry. And it was actually because of brioche that I wanted to publish, because when I first started, it was 2014, and there weren't a lot of brioche knitting patterns available. Like there were some, Stephen West was designing with brioche and Nancy Marchant, obviously. But there wasn't a lot of what I wanted to see. So I thought, well, what if I just design my own and publish it so I can afford to buy yarn? So that was about it. I think when I started, I didn't really expect it to turn into an actual career where I can support my family and,
Right.
publish a book. And I didn't really think about it that way. It was just like, hey, I can, I just sold a pattern. So I can go buy some yarn or buy a coffee or something.
And it just totally expanded for you.
How it
It did.
evolved? Did it evolve pretty quickly, or was it something that kind of just went slowly as you grew your pattern
It was
portfolio?
Yeah, it was actually pretty fast, because I think it was my pop fizzle hat that I kind of, what is it like? What's the word? Jumped off from that point. And that was in 2015. 2015. So that was pretty quickly after I first started publishing. And I also was featured on Instagram back in the day before Instagram had the algorithm. They
Right.
featured a bunch of different knitters and dyers called Yarn Magic. And I was lucky enough to be featured there. And so I think that really kind of propelled my Instagram following.
Right.
So that really helped
Well,
me to be seen more,
plus your designs are beautiful. So
Thank you. Thank you.
I sure bought that pattern when it came out, the hat.
Oh, the pop fizzle hat.
Fizzle.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was that. And that's the same pattern I'm wearing here, which is my Sizzle Pop sweater that is coming on Friday. So
Yay, I'm so excited. I cannot wait to talk about your sweater. I'm so
Yay.
fascinated by like your jobs you had in the past and living in New York and working, getting a degree in fiber arts, and how did all of that experience like inform what you do now?
Well, I mean, I think I've always been an artist. I actually originally wanted to be an art teacher for elementary school kids. But that was in such low demand that I would have had to start off as like a third grade science teacher. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't
And
think
that
I can do that.
wasn't really what you were thinking,
No.
right?
So I didn't really know what to do. And my mom said, well, why don't you try interior design? Because, you're always rearranging your room and decorating. And I thought, what? Like, that's a job? I think I didn't really think about design as a career. So, when I went to the College for Creative Studies, which is a private art school in Detroit, Michigan, and I majored in interior design there, but part of our curriculum is we had to take a fiber arts class to learn how fabric is made. And I became obsessed because we learned how to weave, knit, sew, dye fabric, dye yarn, embroider. We learned how to do resist dye. I mean, it was fascinating. So that's why I got a minor in fiber design, because it was so interesting to me, because it was a very arts and crafts oriented school.
That's
So
like
it's
a
very
dream.
hands-on.
Can I go to school there, please?
Yes. It's an amazing school. I mean, they have like a wood shop. So I got to make all of my interior design, like all my models. I got to actually use a real wood shop as opposed to, like,
Not having the tools, right?
Right. So it was amazing. And I think that really, because, I loved knitting so much, and that's where I learned how to knit. And so I think also having the design background helped. And that's why I design, because I must. I don't know if that makes sense. I literally can't not do it. So
I've never heard it said that way. That's really cool. Like,
yeah.
saying that you have to do that. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So we know like brioche is your specialty, but how did you first come to that? How did you first get fascinated by it?
Well, I was knitting a striped baby blanket for my son. So this was before I was designing. And my husband, he's a philosophy professor. So he's always asking me questions and helping me kind of think out of the box. I mean, honestly, most of my designs are thanks to him and getting me to think outside of my comfort zone. And so he asked me, can you do vertical stripes in knitting? And I hadn't done any stranded color work or anything like that. So I didn't know about corrugated ribbing. I didn't know about anything that would be vertical stripes. So I went and Googled it. And that's when I found two color brioche, because two color brioche, it really does look like vertical stripes.
Right.
When you're looking at just the even ribbing. And that was when Pearl Soho had just released that two color brioche cowl that was cream and hot pink.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and I'm like, what is happening right now? So it was a huge rabbit hole. I bought Nancy's book. I have it here with me. I actually just got to meet her in real life. I bought Knitting Fresh Brioche.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have that. I use that a lot in my work.
Yes. So I sourced this book and all of my patterns, and I became obsessed. I knit a shawl from there. I knit Stephen West's Ferocious Brioches, which I highly recommend. It's a great kind of beginner brioche pattern. And I was obsessed. I'm still obsessed. Honestly, it's so fascinating. And at the time, there weren't very many patterns available. I mean, now brioche is everywhere.
Yeah.
No,
it was pretty much it was very niche,
Yeah.
It was.
I love though how you jumped way over stranded knitting
right
into a technique that many knitters have never even tried. Like it met a need there, didn't it, for your design brain?
It did. And I think that was the challenge for me, was what can I, there were all the stitch patterns in Knitting Fresh Brioche, which Nancy developed, and, it's her lifetime's work, but I thought, well, what can I do? What could I take these techniques and make something new with it? And so that was the challenge that I had a lot of fun with.
And that's the artist in you coming out.
Right.
where you can build on a previous artist's work and make it even more. So
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
thank you.
brioche is something that, like Sarah was saying, jumped over stranded color work, and like brioche is something that has this like mystique about it. Like people have this
It
like
does.
nervousness, about knitting brioche, and it's like you're making it accessible,
Oh, thank you.
to beginners, even beginner knitters. So what is the trickiest part about that? I'm kind of torn which question I want to ask you first, but because like you're teaching too, it's like,
Oh,
so what is the trickiest part about writing the patterns for brioche? Like what?
yeah, I think it's really the let me start. I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer this. I think it's the fabric that it creates. So, for example, brioche shawls come very naturally to me. Like I'm going to develop the stitch pattern and then I can apply it to any shape, any shawl shape that I want. That actually took me a while to understand how to develop a stitch pattern, even take a stitch pattern from a knitting stitch dictionary and then apply it to a certain shape of a shawl. So obviously it's very straightforward to take it and just put it into a rectangle, like that's always going to be, pretty straightforward. But when you're talking about, an asymmetrical triangle knit on the bias or top down triangle, it's a little more complicated to
there's
apply a stitch
shaping in
pattern.
there.
Yeah, there's shaping. And so it did take me a lot. There's not a lot of resources out there for
Mm.
taking, there's like Shetland lace. So I kind of took those kind of techniques from, I have a Shetland lace book that really helped me figure out, oh, it's really just about, charting it first with the shaping and then applying the stitch pattern. So I'm getting into the technical nitty gritty of.
We love it. Keep
Yes,
going, keep
we
going.
love it.
I figured you would, yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm actually developing a new class called Designing with Brioche. So to help people kind of
Yeah.
create new stitch patterns and apply them to shawl shapes. Well, when you're talking about sweaters, like the one I'm wearing, it gets 10 times more complicated because unlike traditional top-down circular yoke sweaters that has, stranded color work, you can hide the increases.
Right.
But with brioche, there's no hiding them. You see, like here, so these increases here, that's part of the shaping. So the trickiest part was not knitting my own sample, but grading it for 12 sizes.
Yeah.
That was
for sure. I'm just
the trickiest part.
Man, I'm just that, I've tech-edited a lot of brioche, but not ever a sweater. And I'm just like, I want to see that pattern so.
Well, and maybe can we talk a little bit about the structure of brioche for people who are not familiar with it? Because when I see that sweater, on a camera, we're seeing it 2D, but in reality, brioche is three-dimensional, and
it is. It creates I'm lifting my sweater up here. It creates a double-sided fabric.
Right. And so that's the tricky part about it is brioche has to be, you've got a vocabulary that kind of takes it outside of the knit purl realm when you're writing.
Right. And it still kind of acts like a ribbing, like a 1x1 ribbing. But what I tell people is it doesn't have the bounce back that ribbing does. Because brioche likes to really open up and, it creates a very dense fabric. Oh, thank you everybody in the chat. And they're all saying comments about my sweater. And I want to say hi to Lexi too. She's one of my patrons. Hi, Lexi. And thank you, Pat. Yeah, that's so nice. Knitting goals.
You can do it, Pat. You can do it.
So I don't know if that answers your question about the structure. For my sweater, actually, I wanted it to be a very dense fabric. So I'm using DK weight yarn, but I actually use a size US3 needle. So I went down several needle sizes than I normally would. Like if I was knitting a hat with DK, I would use like a size 6 needle.
So
So
that
I'm really
takes away some of like the squish factor.
well,
You
no,
Is it still
it
squishy?
it's still very, very squishy, but it's less open. So the fabric is more dense. And so it does have a bit more of that bounce back
Gotcha.
as opposed to, for shawls, I do want them to open up and,
As opposed to being
drape.
loose, like
Yeah.
Right. This one, I wanted it to be really fitted and dense and not feel like I'm wearing a potato sack.
Well, I
That's it.
think you accomplished it. That's
Oh,
absolutely
thank
gorgeous.
you.
How well it fits at your neck and your shoulders.
Oh, thank you.
oh my God, I want that pattern so bad. I could get one.
Well, it's Friday.
Yeah, coming Friday. Yeah.
Friday.
Woohoo!
Yay. So, and
Um,
with brioche too, just another thing, it uses up to twice as much yarn, if not more,
Right.
than like a stockinette or garter stitch. So, I mean, for my size 4, which I'm wearing, I used 8 skeins of yarn total, probably, so 4 for the main color and 4 for the contrast color. So, it's a lot of it's a lot of yarn.
yarn. But you're getting like you said, a double knit fabric. So it's going to be, and using the gauge that you use, it's going to be super warm. And
yes, it's very warm. I can
So-
attest to that.
We have a really good question. Brioche is usually 2 rows. Like in other words, you have to work 2 rows to get 1 row of
Right.
finished work.
Yep.
And
Yes.
so Lindsay asked a really great question. Have you tried knitting 1 pass 2 color brioche? Which we're gonna get super technical.
Yeah. I have not. Have you? Have either of you?
No.
No.
I don't know how that would work. I'm not familiar with this, but I'm not the brioche person.
well,
okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christina.
No, I just was gonna say, I haven't seen that with two colors, only one. So that's all I was gonna say.
Right. Yeah. With one color, you're still every 2 rows equals 1 completed row, but it's just one color, so you're just knitting one at a time.
Or there's like the half brioche stitch where you get that kind of look.
Yes.
Like, the real deal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have not tried it. I haven't even really done a lot of research on what Nancy calls it, double Dutch, which I think is really cute.
Oh, like the
right,
jump rope?
like the jump rope. She calls it double Dutch knitting when you do it, like the 1 pass. But I've also heard that the fabric can look a little different. So I think that's why I was a little hesitant to try the 1 pass.
Yeah.
I definitely do it when I tink, though. I tink both colors at once. That's a lot faster.
So those of you who are unfamiliar with this term, tinking is unknitting. It's the word knit backwards. So when we undo our work, we tink. So yeah. Lindsay, thank you for asking that question. If you want to throw a link into the comments about where we can find out more about doing 1 pass 2 color brioche, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, if you have a resource for that, we're totally interested.
Yeah.
And so you teach, so in your classes, you must also teach how to fix mistakes?
I do. I have a whole class dedicated to fixing mistakes.
What are your favorite lessons to teach?
Well, that one, so I call it Fixing and Finishing Brioche. That is one of my favorite classes to teach because it's kind of more of a lecture style. I have students can bring in projects that they've made a mistake on if they want to, like I could help them figure out how to fix it. Or I just love to teach all of my, it took me years to figure out the anatomy of the fabric, how to fix mistake. When I first made a mistake in brioche, I just kind of sewed it up and, I gave it to my mom and I was like, here you go. I don't think she ever noticed it. So, but for my own designs, obviously, if I make a mistake, I can't just,
right.
I have to actually, and with brioche, it's a little bit more complicated when you have the increases and the decreases, unlike traditional lace where you could drop down and add a yarn over or add, a decrease. It's more difficult to do that with brioche because it affects the fabric, the whole fabric. So like if I made a mistake up here, but I didn't see it until I got way down here, I can't really drop down and add it in because it affects the rest of the fabric. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. You can even throw it completely off and end up sort of
Exactly.
doing like the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. Because it affects everything. So as opposed to lace where the design is made with the holes, this is made with the actual stitches. So you're almost drawing with it.
I feel like a huge part of learning brioche is learning how to fix your mistakes and do it correctly. Do you find that that was a big hurdle for you when you were learning?
Can you ask that one more time? I was reading a bunch of chats just came in. I was like reading the chats. I'm like, wait, what? Sorry.
I'm going to put the link for her courses in here because Jen's like, I would love to learn tricks for fixing brioche.
I think.
Oh, yes. In my online course, at the end of every part, so there's 4 parts, there's a whole fixing lesson that's over an hour long that helps with that particular part.
And when I took your class at Fiberfest,
Yes.
that was like crucial for me. I'm like, I can do brioche, but if I can't fix it, I'm not going to do brioche.
Right. And that's, I think that's where a lot of was that what your question was? Like
how crucial is fixing to knowing, having confidence within doing this technique?
I think it is a huge part of it because, when you're knitting something and you don't know how to fix a mistake, it can be very frustrating because then you have to just rip the whole thing out.
Or you might not even always recognize it. I mean, I think it's just like in any other knitting, you have to be able to read your stitches and understand what it looks like, what you're doing and what it looks like reading your knitting, And so I think in brioche, it gets trickier to read it and see what's going on because there's so much going on.
There's so much going on and there's so much yarn. So when you're, when you drop this is what I always tell my students is, when you have just even brioche like this, like the brioche ribbing, you can very easily just drop, maybe I shouldn't say easily, but you can drop down, like let's say you drop a stitch or you missed a yarn over or something, you can actually drop down and fix a mistake and then pick it back up. But there's a lot of yarn involved. And so it can be overwhelming to know, okay, what am I looking at here? What's this yarn strand? And so that's part of my class is explaining, knit a swatch. That's what I did. I just knit swatches and then made mistakes on purpose, ripped them out to see what the fabric looked like, took my needles out, see if I could put my needles back onto the live stitches. And then I always recommend with increases and decreases, use lifelines because, then you don't have to worry so much about knowing how to fix a mistake. If you know that, if you don't know what a lifeline is, it's basically putting in a strand of yarn or thread on your live stitches and then continuing to knit. So then if you make a mistake, all you have to do is rip back to that lifeline. And then you don't have to worry about your stitches falling off or dropping down.
Or not being able to pick them up right or not. No, sometimes I think when you're picking up stitches again, you sometimes can get the wrong row, and not even have all the stitches of the correct row picked up.
So
yes.
So how do you do your lifeline? Inquiring minds want to know. Do you use dental floss? What do you use?
I use embroidery floss actually.
Oh, okay.
Because it's very smooth. I feel like dental floss can be really sticky, which is probably good. I mean, I guess that could be a good thing if you don't want it to slip out, but I feel like it's harder to place it. Whereas embroidery floss is smooth. And that's what I use for putting my sleeves on hold too, because it's so smooth. It's very easy to just,
Yeah. That's
how do you apply it? Do you use a tapestry needle or do you put it on how do you get it through the stitches?
I like to place to be honest, I don't use lifelines because because I know I always suggest. I suggest
that I don't have to.
Well, see, because I feel comfortable enough to just rip it out, put my needle
Right.
back on, and it's fine because I can go down and fix a mistake or I can tink back. I am confident enough with my brioche that I feel
So it
like I
can
can
take
do
more
that.
time to put the lifeline in when you don't need it.
Right, exactly. I'm like, "Oh, I don't need the lifeline. I can just," because that happened to me once. I was designing a shawl and I realized I forgot a decrease and I had to rip out like 50 rows, which is actually 100
Oh,
Brioche
rows.
rows. Yes.
But it was great because I actually really enjoyed knitting the shawl. So I was actually really happy about it that I still got to, okay, rip back and just keep going.
oh, good.
But yeah, so what I do is I place my lifeline, or I recommend to place the lifeline and then start the next row. So place it with a tapestry needle as opposed to placing it as you work that row, if that makes sense. Like if a lot of interchangeable needles have the lifeline hole where you can place your lifeline as you go. But I'm like, well, what if I make a mistake on that row
Mm.
while I'm placing the lifeline?
You definitely have to place it on a row you're solid on that you know is
Yes,
right.
exactly. Right. And I say every repeat, if you finish a repeat and it looks good, add a lifeline.
And this is the beauty of our craft is we can
Hmm.
rip back mistakes, we can add a
Yes,
lifeline. If only we could do this in all areas of our life. I'm just gonna add a
I
lifeline
know.
here so I can work back to this area of my life.
Sometimes I do wish I had the undo button though,
Yeah.
like a computer, like delete,
Yeah. I love
control
this about
Z.
knitting.
Yeah. But yes, it is. It's very like if you make a mistake, it's just knitting. That's what I like to say
Mhm.
to myself. It's just knitting. You can just rip it out and put it down for a timeout for a couple weeks and
Well, I feel
come
like
back to it
that, like
later.
in brioche, there's always more and more, right? Like you have those books that there are, but then it's like I do a pattern and there's these new stitches and new ways to work with brioche
Yeah.
and new ways to create increases and decreases. I mean, is that part of the fun for you? Is like innovating how to work with the technique to make it do different things for you? Like,
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I'll even sketch ideas out and then see if I can actually make it work with brioche, or I'll take a stitch pattern that's maybe a lace pattern and I'll convert it to brioche and it looks completely different. That's actually what I did for my Stellaire shawl. I took just a traditional, 4 hole flower floral lace pattern that just looks like a little, 4 little holes like in a diamond shape.
oh yeah.
And I just did it with brioche, but it looked completely different. Like it didn't look at all like the lace pattern, but it was really cool. I really liked the way that it looked. It more looked like a nebula kind of a thing.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like the innovation is it's so cool.
It's
Like
fun. It's so fun.
because I don't have that kind of brain. Like I don't
Mhm.
not a creator, I'm a checker, okay? So, like, it's
Well, we also need you in our lives. Yes.
so it's fun to see the new things people can come up with, like, it's so cool.
It is really cool. I
So
love
our
seeing what
next
other people do with it.
yeah. So our next question is, what advice would you give to a designer just starting out?
Well, I think my biggest piece of advice would be to find a community, find a designer that you can become friends with. Because I had that. I had designers who were my friends, and it really helped to have somebody, and I still do. I still have a lot of designer friends because there aren't a lot of resources out there for designers. I think there's actually a lot more now than there were when I started. Um, there's books and everything, but there wasn't really a community. I mean, there was a little bit on Ravelry. I think Ravelry has a really great community for designers. Like if you're looking for test knitters, there's a lot of Ravelry groups because that was, I think, my biggest thing starting out. How do I find people who want to test knit this stuff when I hadn't really published that much? And definitely test knit every single pattern, even if it's just a little cowl, that's so important.
Thank you.
And find a tech editor because getting somebody to look, and you could even find a tech editor if you don't have a lot of money. Like I had no money when I first started designing. I mean, I still have no, I'm just kidding. But it's, you know what I mean? It's like, if you don't have a budget for tech editing, find somebody who maybe you can trade with, or who's maybe they're starting out tech editing too. And so you can kind of get into the journey together. And I mean, I'm not saying don't pay people, but I'm just saying if you don't have the resources, there are probably people out there. I don't know. Maybe I'm just putting my foot in my mouth.
No, this is great advice.
No, but trading skills is a great idea.
Skills is there.
There's usually I've done that. I've done tech edits for trades for lots of different reasons.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's hard when if you're just starting out designing, you might not make enough money to pay for the tech editing for it. And that's happened to me before many times, where I publish a pattern and I didn't sell very many, and it's fine. It's all good, but it can be kind of overwhelming at first, where you're like, I'm spending all this money and am I getting anything back from it?
And it's tricky because if you are trying to build up your business and build up a name for yourself as a designer, you don't want to put out a pattern that's not correct.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to get you customers. So it's really important to do.
Tech editing is so important. Plus, I mean, my patterns have so many stupid typos, and it's embarrassing.
They all do. Lesley, yeah, they all do.
Well, and Jen just asked a really good question.
Yeah.
If I chart my brioche or write my instructions, I actually, for my patterns, if the chart is necessary, I do provide both, but I only knit from my charts. So this is where a tech editor is really important for me, because my charts are always flawless, but my written instructions are a mess because I sit there and write it all out, and it's always mistakes.
Right.
I'm just kidding. My charts aren't flawless, but you know what I mean? It's like I knit for my charts. I find all the mistakes from my charts.
I think designers who are chart people, and that's often the correct part is the chart, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's often the case,
Okay, yeah, that's definitely me. The chart's always
like more of a control.
Right. That's what I always tell my tech editor. I'm like, okay, please check my written instructions against my chart, because I know the chart is correct because I just knit my entire shawl from my chart. And yes. So, but written instructions are important too, because I know not everybody is a chart knitter. So.
And brioche charts are they take a little bit of a different brain power than like a traditional other kind of color work chart. Even a mosaic chart. It's a little different.
Very much so.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
It's like it's a new language. That's what I tell people. Brioche itself is a new language. The chart is also like reading a new language. It's like a hieroglyph. I was writing one of my patterns the other day, and my son came in and he's like, what are you writing, mommy? Why don't you just write real words?
You're
it's
coding.
Like verb 1, slip 1, YOF. Yeah.
Okay, so when you write it, do you do slip 1 yarn over, or how do you write what is your preferred way to do that brioche stitch?
Well, I actually have 2 different abbreviations for whether you're for the slip 1 yarn over. So if you're working with knit stitches or brioche knit stitches, I write YF slip 1 yarn over, because you have to bring your yarn to the front. And if I'm working with purl stitches or brioche purl stitches, it's slip 1 YOF. So you do the slip 1 yarn over and then bring it back to the front.
That was often an issue in the abbreviation list, because SL1YO, like slip 1 yarn over, would be the abbreviation throughout the pattern. Right. But the abbreviation list definition wouldn't say bring yarn to the front, or with yarn.
Right.
So knitters who are new and don't know will just slip the stitch, and they don't know that they need to bring the yarn.
You got to bring the yarn forward.
Right. You got to wrap that. You got to wrap that slip stitch. It's not like mosaic where you just slip it,
right.
Or they would slip it and then make a yarn over. So then they're doing 2 separate.
So that's where your abbreviation, however you abbreviate it, you've got to have it clearly defined.
Yes.
So that a new knitter knows, if they've never seen slip 1 yarn over before, what actually is happening.
Exactly.
So that's a really smart way to do it that you're describing is, depending on which way you're working it, making sure that what you're doing with the yarn is actually in the abbreviation. So that's.
Yes, it is. It's I just want my patterns to be as least confusing as possible.
Which I think
Take
is
the confusion
also
away.
excellent advice for a beginning designer. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's the other reason why you need a tester and you need a tech
Mhm.
editor is this confusing?
Is this
So,
confusing?
Right.
Right. And there's a lot of things that test knitters find that my tech editor wouldn't find. And that's not to the fault of my tech editor,
Well,
but there's things that you find as you're knitting it.
it's a
that-
whole different way of experiencing
Right.
the pattern.
It is. It really is. And like this sweater, I mean, I had to push the release date at least once or twice because there were a lot of mistakes. And that wasn't necessarily my tech editor's fault, but it was like things weren't symmetrical for some sizes. And so there was a lot of tweaking and, you know, I think we're on like the 6th or 7th version of the pattern. Like that never happens to me with test knitting. It's usually like maybe 1 or 2 versions, you know.
Was it because of like different sizes? Had the motifs were off?
Right. So, you know, I wanted to have the neckband be fairly close fitting for most sizes, you know, but you know, you go from a small neck opening, sometimes people's shoulders are bigger or smaller. So the increases here to get to the pop band are different for every single size.
Right.
It's different.
And you have to make sure the motif is in the right place in every single size. Yeah.
Right. So I say that in a note to say, you know, everybody's sweater is going to look a little bit different, but that's kind of the cool thing with brioche is, you know, this part's going to look the same for everybody. But yeah, so, I mean, I think if people are on board with that and they know that it's going to look a little different, hopefully it's okay. I don't know. This pattern is what I've like so nervous to release it into the world because
I think that's like what you were saying earlier in this hour, that the increases and decreases in the sweater are integral. They're part of the design. Like they're part of the picture that you're making on your sweater. So
right. Yep.
if you're increasing more stitches, it's going to look a little different.
Right. I wanted to make sure at least, you know, the portion of increases after the pop band looked uniform with every pattern. So I think it's going to be okay.
It'll be great.
Well, thank you.
Here's the cool part, and I think that's excellent advice for a new designer too, is listen to how many versions she went through. This is before publication.
Right.
It's to kind of work through as many of the issues as you can before you publish, so you don't have to publish as much errata afterwards. So that's awesome.
Which is worth it.
Yeah.
Like slow down. It's okay. You know, don't hit go.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
You know,
it's a process.
It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's time.
Right. I mean, I think sorry, what, Christina?
I just said it's a job. I mean,
it's a job.
finding a sweater in all those sizes, it's a big job. And so add in like the complicated stitches that you're using, and it's a job, you know?
Exactly. Right. And you know, it's I think the design process, it takes a really long time, even if you're just designing a hat or a cowl. You know, it's not just, okay, I knit it up and write up the pattern and I publish it. Well, no, you have to get the tech editing done. And sometimes I knit 3 or 4 samples before I even, you know, give it to my tech editor. And so, yeah, like you said, slow down, you know, sometimes it can feel like the pressure to stay relevant and constantly release new patterns. The pressure to do that can be really overwhelming. But I think it's just important to do what makes you feel happy, and don't just design something because it's popular. Don't just design something because that's what everybody else is knitting. Design what you want to see in the world. That's why I do what I do. I don't, you know, sometimes I'll say to my husband, like, oh, I'm so nervous about this one. I don't know if anybody's going to like it. And he has to remind me all the time, that's not why you do this.
Right.
That's not why you design. And it's like, oh yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in but I want to sell. I want to sell the patterns. But at the same time, to not care about that, it's really hard. It's a hard balance.
Well, because I think that what you're going to do best is what you care about the most.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
So that's going to be a better product because it's what you care about and what you want to, like you said, see in the world. And then that's going to
Exactly.
make your work better. Then you just, your people will find you and want your thing the way
Exactly.
you want it.
Right. And that's why I say too, for new designers, there's room for all of us, because if
Yes.
I don't have it, then this other designer will, you know? I mean, how many patterns are there on Ravelry now? Like 1.2 million or something? I mean, give me a break. There's got to be something out there.
There's got to be something you'll like. You have a lot of nice comments here in the comment section.
Oh, yay. Oh,
And
diagonal brioche. Cool.
what's amazing is that there's 1.2 or whatever, however many million patterns, but still there's something that designers come up with something new.
I
Like
know.
even though, basic our craft is, a basic binary code, we still come up
Right.
with all these new ways of clothing our body with this beautiful yarn.
It is. It's really incredible.
What are you excited about now, Lesley?
Talk to us. Tell us about that shawl too.
Oh, yeah. So this one, I wanted to do. So this is I'm calling it Heart is a Spade.
Oh my God.
So you might remember that song by Elastica.
Yes.
I might be dating myself here. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. So I wanted to actually design it as a spade first. Sorry, that's the heart way. Because I used Mace of Skeins yarn, and I'll show her logo here. Her logo is a spade like that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But then one of my patrons was like, "Oh my gosh, are you making brioche hearts?" Like,
oh my God, I love it.
It is. And then some people see like monstera leaves.
Yeah.
Or like shells. I think my husband saw shells.
Yep.
I see wings.
I can see wings too now, actually. So, yeah, this one's actually, I'm going to put it into test knitting today, actually.
So is that double-sided too? Like, did you use
Yes.
2 different color yarns, or is it slightly? Oh, wow.
See?
It is. So it's 2-color brioche, but the background is what I call 2-color garter stitch. Some people call it micro garter stitch. So you're basically
cool.
like, you're knitting with one color, and then when you slide it back, you purl with the other color. So if that makes sense.
Fabulous.
So it's a really great background for brioche because it really makes the pattern pop.
Yeah, I've not seen that.
What's the name of that shawl?
Heart is a Spade.
Heart is a Spade.
So yeah, I'm gonna release that one in April. So
can we? That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
you.
And what else are you excited about?
Well, I decided that I'm going to start a new tradition. So you might know I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Okay, like Star Wars, everything, all the time. I've seen if anything that they've ever made for Star Wars. So I designed my Rebel shawl, which is my most popular shawl. I don't have it with me actually. I should have brought it over here. But so I first designed Rebel 1 when Carrie Fisher passed away, because I was like, Princess Leia was my role model growing up. And I had a Princess Leia action figure, and, when I was a kid. And and then I did Rebel 2, which was a 2-color brioche. And then it just got really popular because 2-color brioche is just way more fun than because Rebel 1 was 1-color brioche.
Well, and this is, I'm looking on your website, Rebel Girl shawl. Is that another different variation too?
Oh no, that one, I actually just released that pattern. That was for Rebel Girl, a colorway that Old Rusted Chair develops to support abortion care. So that shawl, it's like if you buy that yarn, the Rebel Girl yarn, that shawl is a free pattern that you can get.
Oh, cool.
But no, if you just look up Rebel, that one is my kind of a crescent shape. Star Wars homage. Well, so then I designed a shawl called Ahsoka, which was inspired by Ahsoka Tano, she was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan learner. So she was in Clone Wars, but then if you watch The Mandalorian, she's also in that, like as an adult. So I designed an Ahsoka shawl. Well, I thought, okay, I got to do this every year now. So I'm working on a new Star Wars inspired shawl pattern. I should have brought it with me. I don't have it here.
Can you give us a hint what it's about?
Yes. So I'm starting every year. I'm going to design a new Women of Star Wars shawl. And this year it's inspired by Hera Syndulla, who is a rebel pilot. She basically started the rebellion with, Leia and all those people. But so she was in Star Wars Rebels, which is another cartoon. But it's inspired by her favorite fruit, which is called a Meluran. And so I'm inspired by that. So I have some sneak peeks on my Instagram. I should have had it with me so I could show you. It's
That's
on my
so
couch in the
fun.
living room.
That is so fun.
Fanific. That's awesome.
I love it.
Yeah,
Love
Star Wars fan, high five, yay. Yeah, I have ideas for the next at least 3 years. And I always release them on May the 4th, which is
Of
Star Wars
course,
Day.
May the 4th.
With you?
Exactly.
Fun. I love it. We can't wait to see that.
I know. That's so
Thank
cool.
you. And there's brioche in it, of course.
Are you sure about that? Like,
I know.
have you designed without brioche? Like, have you done stuff without it? Like,
Yes,
design?
actually, I do have quite a few designs that are really great for beginners, like especially beginner knitters who want to knit shawls. And I really want to start designing more sweaters. And I know not everybody likes to wear brioche sweaters. So I'm thinking that if I design it with maybe a little bit of brioche or no brioche,
Well, what
that
is
would
it
be.
that they don't like?
I don't know.
Like-
Maybe it's just the way that it sits on their body. I don't know.
I think you're kind of solving that with your tighter gauge.
I think you might
situation.
be.
Yeah,
Because I
maybe
think
so.
a lot of people's hang up is the stretch factor. Is it being
Yeah.
loose and like it's
Expansive.
not going to retain its shape, So I think you
Right,
might
right.
be solving that with your
Oh,
tighter gauge.
right. And maybe it's for people who have larger chests. Like maybe it's a bit more
Mhm.
not as I don't know. Maybe I'm
Maybe
generalizing,
we
but
do a poll. We gotta find out. So, what is
I
it
should do
about
a
brioche
poll.
sweaters? But you have designed pieces for just regular knitting,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
not brioche knitting.
Yes.
But
Yes, you can
that's where
find
your
them.
love is in that you're gonna throw brioche in it anyway.
I gotta throw some brioche in it. Yes, I do. I know. I love trying new things with it, and it
Is it-
just yeah.
Is it hard to? So I've tried to do like a brioche edging. Like you have a sweater with a brioche edging that meets a regular
Oh yes, my
regular
La
knitting.
Brioche. Mhm.
Because of the gauge differences. How do you accommodate that within the like adding? You said, well, I add brioche to it. Well, then
Yeah.
how do you change needle size? Well, how do you accommodate in your design for the different gauges?
I do. A lot of the times for shawls, I don't change my needle size.
Mhm.
Just because, as long as I like what the fabric looks like, I will kind of let it be what it is, if that makes sense for a shawl. But for that sweater in particular, I did change needle sizes. So for the hem, I knit that first, and I think I used a smaller needle size. And then when I went to the stockinette, I went up a couple of needle sizes.
Yeah.
So that the stockinette was not super tight.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. Even just we could probably have another half an hour conversation
I know.
about measuring gauge.
Yeah.
Measuring gauge of brioche. We did not even ask you that question.
We didn't ask that.
I know.
What's your favorite way to measure the gauge? How do you like?
Well, it depends on what the fabric is too. Like, so for this one, when I originally envisioned the sweater, I wanted it to be the sizzle pop pattern, the whole thing.
Oh.
But it just wasn't possible because that would be so hard to grade. Because I would only have like 3 sizes because the stitch pattern, it doesn't go across a 4-inch increment.
Right.
So, and then for the sleeves, so I usually, that's why I did kind of the even brioche. So if you're doing the even brioche, like the ribbing, it's a lot easier to measure the gauge because you'll just measure it across the stitches. So you'll count like what I call the valleys and the mountains. So you kind of count it like ribbing. And then when you count the rows, you just count the V stitches that look like a V, like a knit stitch. But like if you have a stitch pattern like this, then you have to measure across that for the gauge. So it gets a little bit more complicated because you're like, wait, where's the stitch? And the fabric moves.
Yeah.
So like you can see I put a little cuff detail and I know it's my favorite part of the sweater.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hold that up to the camera. Isn't that pretty?
That is awesome.
I love it.
And the hem, you can't see the hem either. The hem has it there
I was
too.
going to ask you if the hem had brioche on it, knowing you.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Oh.
So it's really, and it's kind of a cropped silhouette. So I think some of my testers lengthened their sweaters a little bit, but.
So you would measure, so knowing where a stitch starts and ends is crucial when you're measuring the gauge. But when you put it into the pattern, do you just put the regular, vertical ribbing?
Right. So I always specify, I'll pick basically the most straightforward stitch pattern.
Right.
So like for this one, I don't even call out the gauge for this part.
Mm-hmm.
I just call out the gauge for like the vertical ribbing. So like if I have a shawl where it has garter stitch and brioche and lace, I'll just do the gauge for garter stitch because I figure if you get gauge with garter stitch, you will probably get gauge or at least close to it with the other stitches too.
So for this sweater, how did your testers make out with their gauge for the sweater?
They were pretty good. I think I had one test knitter who had to go down to a size 2 needle, which I felt so bad for her. I was like,
loose knitter.
and she's knitting the size 10. So I was like, oh, so that's a lot of knitting.
Yeah, but bringing that yarn forward, you add yarn.
Then
it's very forgiving. Sorry, what, Christina?
Gauge is the same. If their gauge was right, then it's the same. It's just that she's probably a loose knitter.
She's a loose knitter, yeah. And I always recommend, and I always say it in my patterns, knit your gauge swatch like you're gonna knit your sweater. So like for this one, it's in the round. So don't knit a flat gauge swatch because it will. And I have my gauge swatch here. I'm gonna hopefully stand up for a second. Sorry, I have it right here.
Everybody in the comments is loving your cuffs.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm gonna do like that as like the main photo, like something like this or something. I don't know.
I love it.
So
it's down over the hand. Oh
yeah. So here's my swatch. So I did it the cheat way.
No. Okay. So talk about this. This is important. You did the cheat way. So
So instead of knitting, so one way to knit in the round is to just knit a straight up tube, right, of what you have. But I did it the cheat way where it still is knit as a tube, but instead of knitting a whole way around, you just knit across the row and then you slide it back, carry your yarn across the back. So you don't even have to
loose bit of yarn in the back.
Yeah.
And then
you don't even have to Right. And you don't even have to cut it. Like if you're afraid that you're going to run out of yarn, you can just leave leave it as a loop and then block it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you need the extra, because like this is unusable. Like if I wanted to reuse
I think it's gorgeous. I have that as a trivet on my desk.
But what I mean is like if you need to reuse the yarn. Oh, right. Like Christina.
You can leave the yarn in the back.
Exactly. But yeah, I have it up on my bulletin board. That's where I took it down
Love
from.
it. So, but what you're saying is super important. You've got to make the swatch in the same method, round or flat, back and forth.
Well, and the biggest reason to like, if you're going to knit your sweater on circular needles going around, you can't do your swatch on DPNs or magic loop.
No.
So you'd have to make a swatch if you were going to do it on a circular needle and not do it the cheat way. Right. You'd have to make a big swatch on like a 16-inch, circular needle.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. That's a really good point. Cause I think my gauge did change a little bit once I actually knit my sweater, but it was it was maybe very, very minutia. And brioche is also really forgiving.
Oh, I love it.
So like if you're in between sizes or something, it stretches a lot.
What a beautiful description. It's expansive, stretchy, and forgiving. It sounds like someone we'd want to have coffee with.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's basically my entire goal with designing is I want everybody to become as obsessed and crazy about brioche. I want to kind of lift the veil, make it fun, make it accessible. So,
Love it. I love
Get
it.
everybody obsessed.
exactly. Oh my gosh, Lindsay. Ah! She said she wants to knit her little French bulldog a sweater that matches her rebel too. Okay, that's maybe next. Maybe next I got to do a rebel sweater.
There you go. That's what you got to do. What do you love about our industry?
Well, I love, I think I love like most of the designers that I've met. I mean, I would even have to say all the designers that I've met have just been so wonderful to talk to. Like I could ask questions, and every time I'm in person with another designer, we always say things like, "Oh my gosh, this is so great." I never get to talk to other designers because sometimes it can be a very singular kind of seclusive um, job or career because, I mean, I don't know what other people think, but it's just me. I don't
Yeah.
have like a team of people. When you send an email for pattern support, it's me. When you see an Instagram post, that's me. I don't have a team of, I mean, I have a tech editor, but and I have my husband, he did all my graphics because I feel
Wow.
very lucky that I have that. Not everybody has that. So, but yeah, so I think it's great that, and I love working with independent yarn dyers. I think it's amazing that there are so many independent yarn dyers now. I mean, when I first started designing, there were really not very many. There were, you were lucky if you had a local yarn shop who had Madeline Tosh. Like my yarn shop had Madeline Tosh. I was like, oh, and so yes, so I do love that. And I think being more of an online community has really changed the knitting industry. I was having a conversation with Nancy Marchant at the Knitting in the Hills retreat with Hill Country Weavers, and just talking to her about when she first started. That was back in the day when you had to pound the pavement,
Right.
or publish in a magazine or publish a book, or there wasn't Ravelry, there wasn't, so for me to just say, oh, I'm going to publish a pattern, and just I can do that. I don't have to
Mhm.
I don't have to go to a publisher. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's,
I love it.
yeah.
Well, the community.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let me ask this question then. What is your favorite yarn to work with? Now,
Oh,
you don't have to play favorites, but maybe what you're enjoying working with right now.
well, I wanted to go back to one thing about the community. So
Oh,
I
okay.
think for me, the biggest community that I love the most is my Patreon. Okay. So
Ah,
I know I have patrons on here, Lexi and Sarah are on here that I see. And I just, it's like you were saying earlier about like the super fans. Like it just feels like it's not even about being a fan. It just feels like a community of people that I can bounce ideas off of and who are supporting me in anyway. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my patrons because that community is amazing.
and this is relatively new. Like,
Oh,
and
thank you.
even the fact that artists can have patrons
Hmm.
in a forum that's allows international patronage in an
Yes,
easy way. It's
absolutely.
beautiful.
It is amazing.
And we put Christina, thanks for putting her
Yes, thank you,
Patreon into
Christina.
the chat if you're interested in being part of Lesley Ann's fabulous community.
Yes, it's wonderful. We have Discord and we chat all the time. Like I'm actually really good friends with my patrons. Like it's just really amazing. Um, but yeah, so favorite yarn, moving on. I always say my favorite yarn is what I'm currently working with.
Yay!
But I'm actually for my Melu Run shawl that I'm designing, I'm actually working with 4 different dyers that I
Wow.
love and that I've worked with in the past. So Hedgehog Fibers they have been one of my favorite yarns forever. I mean, I remember when I saved up and I bought 2 skeins of their Monet colorway that I was so obsessed with. And they have been a huge support for me as far as yarn support. So, and then the Farmer's Daughter Fibers, love their yarn so, so much. And I've been to their shop out in Montana, and it's just an amazing kind of destination yarn shop. And I'm working with the Wool Kitchen, which is a UK-based dyer. And who's the last one? Oh, Robin's Promise Yarn is another one of my favorites. I've done several patterns with their yarn, and they're in Williamsburg, Virginia area. So that's what I'm working with right now. And the yarn for the sweater is Fru Valborg yarn, which is I think Sweden-based yarn dyer. So yeah, I think from the very, very beginning of my business, my main mission was to support local yarn shops and independent yarn dyers. And that's still what I want to do with.
Well, and brioche lends itself to the variegation that can happen in hand-dyed yarn, and brioche just makes a beautiful tableau for using those kind of yarns. So
it really does, because it breaks up the speckles, and it breaks, like, I don't know if you can tell, this yarn has a very kind of a subtle speckle. Like I think there's a little bit of blue, like right here, you can see there's like a little pop of blue right there.
Oh, right.
And it breaks it up. So if you do have pooling in the yarn, which can happen, it breaks it up in a much more pleasing way than if you just had it with, stockinette.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yay. So yeah, I got to do some name drops there. Name drops.
Totally okay.
And I already dropped Mace of Skeins.
Mace of Skeins showed us the yarn man. It's just fabulous.
Another Texas dye. I also love supporting Texas dyers, which Macy is a Texas dyer too.
So we ask one question to all of our guests, and so far we have one thing that is winning among all our guests. We want to find out. Go ahead, Christina, toss it up there.
What is your favorite knitting notion?
Oh, okay. Well, I actually have two, but I think my number one is the split ring marker by Coco Knits.
I just recently got some of those, and just because I thought they were so pretty, and where I was out.
I've got a blue.
I don't really.
Oh yes.
Properly. Yeah, I don't really use them properly. I just use them as
What's the proper way to use them?
Well, like employing the split part of it.
Right?
Oh, okay.
Hook it in.
I've only employed the split part of it a couple of times, most because I don't tend to use markers that way, like ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the reason I love it so much is because I have it on my sweater right now. So I love using it with the BR 4-stitch decrease, because you have to put a stitch on hold. And this is the best.
It acts like a stitch holder.
It's like
it does.
It's perfect for like cabling one stitch.
Exactly. Yeah. So 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 like as I'm knitting my pattern, like for this one back here too, this one had the 4-stitch decrease. I'll just slip this onto onto my work. So then when I need it, it's just right there, and I can just take it off, and then
it's a cable needle.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. But it seems like it would be a lot easier to use for that than any other kind of holder, because it just like
holds them.
And it's so lightweight.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes those locking markers, like those by Clover or something, they can be really bulky.
Yes.
So and if you accidentally drop a stitch, just throw this on the stitch so it doesn't drop down anymore.
So
right.
If you miss, you're in trouble.
Right. And it just adds extra time. You're like trying to clip it,
So what's number 2 notion? So you got a stitch marker is still winning among all of our guests.
Is it?
Yeah, but this is
I always tell
I will say people have specific types of stitch markers.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Specific reasons, right? But this one, yes.
Well, and forever the only brand that made the split ring marker was Clover, which was fine. But when Coco Knits made them, this like powder coated metal is just so.
And they stick in your if you have a magnetic bowl, you can toss them in there.
Oh, that's the second time that we've been doing this broadcast, Sarah, that you have mentioned this magnetic bowl situation. Listen,
well, it's like for pins, right? for
I gotta
pins,
get one of
for
those.
sewists.
Cool. Like it's
Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta
buy
get
it at the auto repair shop. Yeah, it's like $5.
Right. Oh, that's brilliant.
I gotta
So
get
my second favorite is the Handy Tool by Susan Bates.
Yes.
So
Fix-it
this
tool.
one, what's nice about it is it has the crochet hook at one end and it has a knitting needle at the other end.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Love
As
it.
opposed to most crochet hooks are just
Blunt.
flat,
Like that. Yeah.
blunt. So yeah, this is my.
Have it in every bag. Gotta
So
have
that's a
one.
new one. That's a new one, Sarah.
Oh, it is. Have you been keeping track?
I was just gonna ask you, and assuming you've been keeping track.
That's funny.
It was wonderful chatting with you today, Lesley. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So where can people find you online? And let's also mention your book too.
Oh, yes.
To that yet.
Yeah, let's get the link for the book. Let's get that.
So if you are not familiar with my work, I just published my first book last year called Brioche Knitting for Beginners and Beyond.
The cover. It's so good.
And yeah, that's me without my glasses. I always tell people, they're like, you look familiar. And I take my glasses off. They're like, oh yeah, because I just got glasses. But yep. So this is a great resource if you've never knit brioche before. I've designed it in a way that you start at chapter 1 and make your way through the book. And so as you get farther along in the book, the patterns get more complicated. So it's great. And it has a lot of, front matter. So it has 16 brand new patterns, but then it also has like, here's my how to measure gauge, my favorite tools,
nice,
how to fix mistakes. Yeah.
So a little master class in book form, which we're book fans. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
100%.
That's actually why my publisher approached me, because they had seen my online course and they wanted to do a book version of it. So
I love it.
So but they wanted new patterns. I was like, okay.
Okay, so we're about ready to publish our book this fall.
I
How
know.
long did your book publication process take? Like, ours is 18 months, but how long was yours? Because you have to create patterns.
Right. I did get an extension because I signed my contract basically a week before the pandemic.
Oh.
Which I think for most people would have been fine, but I have kids.
Yeah.
So
your life
I have
completely
kids.
Drastically.
Yeah. They were at home. Right. We were all at home, and it wasn't like I just had millions of hours to just do whatever I wanted. I was a parent and a teacher, and yeah. Wow. So it was good. It probably took, from when I signed my contract, it was almost 2 years.
Okay.
So I would say like 21 months.
Which is quite significantly longer than what it takes to publish a pattern, like unravel.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, or produce a PDF download.
There's a lot of steps and a lot of work.
Yeah.
We got a book endorsement in the comments.
There you go.
Oh, there's Tara. Hi, Tara. She works at Hill Country Weavers.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here, Tara. So I think that's everything. Did we go through all of our questions, Christina?
Oh yeah, where can you find me? Okay.
Yeah, we know. Oh yes, well, your website.
So put the website.
Yeah, basically just search for Knit Graffiti designs, because Knit Graffiti is a thing.
I do
actual Knit Graffiti.
Search for the comments. I think I got our book, our Patreon, Instagram, classes.
And the name. Where does the name come from?
Oh,
well,
it's funny. What?
Why Knit Graffiti?
Why Knit Graffiti? Well, so back in college and after college, that's when, you all know Etsy. Mm-hmm. Etsy was very, very new. So this was back in like 2005, and Etsy was still like really, really brand new. And I had a shop on there, and I called it Pink Graffiti, because pink is, pink is my neutral. That's what I say. Pink is my favorite color.
So much.
Yes, pink is the best, as you can tell, and like with my book. And so I just, so I loved Pink Graffiti, and that was my name on Etsy. And I sold, that was back in the day when you didn't even have to market yourself on Etsy. You just listed something and it sold. There was hardly anybody on there. But so then when I was starting my knitting pattern business, I thought, oh, I could just do knit graffiti because it's kind of the same. And knit graffiti is like a really cool thing to do where you can like graffiti. I mean, I've never done it myself, but you can like graffiti like lamp posts and stuff.
Yarn bombing.
Fence yarn bombing. Yeah. It's also called knit graffiti.
I
So,
did not know that.
which is kind of cool. Yeah. So if you search the hashtag knit graffiti, you also get random posts
you
of
and
like
yarn
actual
bombing.
knit graffiti, right? The actual yarn bombs.
I love it.
So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so that was it.
Fascinating story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for having me. It was so fun to chat with you about myself. And I'm just kidding.
Oh, it's been awesome having you. I love talking about all this.
Thank
So
you
fun.
for sharing your design process, and all the little nitty-gritty
Yeah.
details of this. We really enjoyed having you here today. So
Yay. Thank you
we'll
so
see you.
much.
Thanks,
Thank you
Leslie.
very much for being here.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Oop, and
You cut her off.
I just cut her off. I'm so sorry, Lesley. She's laughing. We could see her down in the green room. So, we have an announcement. 1 week from yesterday, we are going to be participating in Knit for Food, which is started by Laura Nelkin, who was last month's guest with us. We are going to be knitting for 12 hours.
To raise money to fight hunger and food scarcity. The money donated to Knit for Food, 100% is donated to the 4 organizations that they donate to, and it's 100% goes to those organizations, which is really exciting. So we have a goal. So this is our link if you want to go and donate, and if you can't donate, that we totally get that, but maybe you can share our link somewhere where you are or with someone that you know, and that would be awesome. So that's next Sunday, and we're going to be knitting our fingers off for that.
Yeah, so we're Team Tech Tip Talk. And if you are in the North Texas area, I will be at the local yarn shop, Quixotic Fibers, from 12 to 5 knitting there. So you can come join me there if you are interested in supporting a local yarn shop on that day. We've got to put that into the chat. You want to grab that. And then we also have a Patreon. We are able to broadcast this and invite guests and support our guests because of our patrons. So come on over and join us. We do have a very active Discord. We have a lovely community of knitwear designers and tech editors, and we would love to have you. We have some pretty exciting discussions over not just knitting, but books and cooking and all the other things that.
Oh my God. Yeah, we're listen, we're just talking it up over there. There's a lot going on.
So feel free to come in and join us. Every patron is super important to us, and we love being together with you all. So
Yeah,
thanks for being here.
It's a great community to be a part of. It's a really good group, and really do make it possible for us to do this. So.
And so many thanks to our patrons. Our next broadcast is in 1 month, and we would love to see you back here. Same channel, same time, same bat channel.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait.
No,
What?
that's June. So no, April 17th.
Nope. Yep.
June's broadcast is going to be
on a different day.
on a different day. So I just got a little mixed up there.
We have some very exciting guests lined up for the next few months. So we'd love if you join us live. And thank you for being live here today. It was lovely having Lesley and being
We had a
able
great
to
time.
chat all things brioche. And we'll see you guys in a month. Oh, let me get the, okay. I'm going to